George Robert Fitzgerald. George Robert Fitzgerald, a noted duelist, was born in Turlough in 1746, the son of George Sr. and Lady Mary Fitzgerald. His parents separated when he was young, and he was raised in London by his mother and grandmother. He was educated at Eton, but left abruptly to join the army, and eventually was stationed in Galway. Fitzgerald quickly gained a reputation as a duelist and a womanizer, and was quick to quarrel over the smallest insult, leading to duels with locals and other officers. After leaving the army, he married Jane Connolly in 1770. After he married, George Fitzgerald Sr. had promised to make him, George Robert, an allowance of £1,000 a year to be paid out of the rents from Turlough Park. But the old reprobate had in fact squandered the family money so that there was nothing left for his son. Fitzgerald and his wife then moved to Paris, where they lived in an extravagant lifestyle. He borrowed heavily to fund this, and on one occasion he provoked a duel with a creditor to erase the debt. The plan backfired, and he was forced to flee to London. After spending some time in London, in 1775 he moved to Dublin, and it was here that his eccentricity began to fully take hold. To force men to duel with him, he would often knock off their wigs as they passed him, or stood in the middle of the pathway, forcing them into the mud to avoid him. In 1779, he fought Alexander Buck English, another well-known duelist. They met with swords on St. Stephen's Green, with Fitzgerald badly wounded in the duel. During his time in Dublin, Fitzgerald's father, George Sr., aided by his other son Charles, sought to deprive him of his share of the estate. They drew up long-term leases at low rents to local tenants, and a large parcel of land at Carrowkeel was leased to Caesar French for a small rent. Angered by this, Fitzgerald duelled with Caesar French on the streets of Castlebar, beginning at the end of Main Street and eventually ending at Ellison Street. When his father was imprisoned, Fitzgerald took control of the estate and developed it by planting trees, corn and flax. He brought 200 linen workers from Ulster to Turlough to develop the linen industry. This resulted in some Catholic tenants on the estate being evicted. At the same time, Lord Lucan brought a colony of Presbyterians to the area, but following the protests, he moved them to Castlebar, where they settled in an area of the town now known as New Antrim. Following an indictment filed by his father and brother, Fitzgerald was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He escaped on the first day and captured his father, imprisoning him in a cave for 15 months. The entrance to the cave was guarded by a pet bear Fitzgerald had acquired while in Dublin. George Robert Fitzgerald's last quarrel would lead to his execution. He resented a neighbour, Patrick Randell MacDonald, and had him and 2 of his bodyguards arrested on trumped-up charges. They were held overnight in Turlough and were to be moved to Castlebar jail the next day. The following morning, they made their escape with one of the bodyguards being killed as they fled. MacDonald was later killed near Chancery in Turlough. Fitzgerald and 2 others were charged with murder. The county sheriff Dennis Brown, an enemy of the Fitzgeralds, oversaw the trial and sentenced the men to hang. On the 12th of June 1786, the men were taken from the prison at the junction of Castle Street and Ellison Street to the new prison being built at the Mall. There they would be hung from the scaffolds of the new jail. Fitzgerald walked to the gallows an hour after the other 2 men were hanged to avoid being jeered by onlookers. He drank a bottle of port before his hanging to steady himself. The first attempt to hang him failed when the rope broke. At the second attempt, the rope was too long. He was eventually hanged on the 3rd attempt. He was buried in the family vault in Turlough. It is thought that he fought in 30 duels in his lifetime.